purpose. So that is actually our theme for this year. And I remember when I was in my 20s being quite preoccupied with what is my purpose in life. And yet I find as I've got older that it's actually something that never leaves me. And that's led me to think about some characters in the Bible who discovered the fullness of God's purpose quite late in life. I'm sure you can think of some yourself, like Abraham and Sarah. And recently our church has been commemorating Simeon and Anna, who lived for years with this expectation of the Messiah. And it was only in great age that they found their purpose. Well, those of you in the UK, but also because this has become an international story, those in other countries may be able to think of somebody who also in great age found the fullness of their purpose, who died just a couple of days ago. I'm sure you can trip his name off your tongue, Sir Captain Moore. And it was in his 100th year that he just thought, well, I can help the NHS by raising a little bit of money, £1,000, hopefully, by walking with my Zimmer frame around my garden. And a few months later, he had raised £36 million for the NHS. He had been knighted by the Queen. He'd been given all kinds of awards, had made it into the Guinness Book of Records, and had recorded a #1 single hit. And yet he started off wanting to study engineering, but his plans were frustrated because of the outbreak of war, and he signed up and he became an officer in the war. Then he went into business, and David Ball, who's going to be introducing Rachel in a moment, is in a similar field. He went into concrete and became a business leader in the concrete industry. And then he just expected to have a quiet retirement. And it was only when he had this idea of walking with his Zimmer frame around the garden that more of his purpose of public service and service of his fellow human beings did it become clear to him, more of what was in front of him still to do at his age. So just to give us a flavor of that, I'm going to let Google play you a little bit of that hit single right now. Okay, Google, play.
When you walk through a storm, hold your head up high, and don't be afraid of the dark. At the end of the storm, there's a golden sky, and sweet silver song of the lark.
When you walk through a storm, hold your head up high, and don't be afraid of the dark.
At the end of the storm, there's a golden sky, and a sweet silver song of the lark.
Walk on through the wind, walk on through the rain, though your dreams be tossed and blown. Walk on with hope in your heart, and you'll never walk alone. You'll never
alone.
When we walk
Okay, Google stop.
through the storm.
Okay, Google stop.
I
He eventually behaves. I think that's a wonderful kind of way to get our minds focused on this idea of purpose. You may also be interested in our current edition of Faith in Business Quarterly, which has an article in there, first of a series of articles on purpose. It also has an article about a wonderful, huge wall that's going to be built in England, far bigger than the Angel of the North. I'm sorry that there's a little bit something wrong with my screen there. I can adjust that in a minute. But over to David, who will introduce Rachel, and she'll give her own introduction. And thank you very much to both of you for your help with this.
Hi, Rachel. I can't see you. Oh, I can. Welcome to this session. We had a little practice run last week, and I realized I hadn't mentioned some of your achievements and the things that you've done. And having dug a little bit further into websites and various sources of information, I'm amazed to read that you specialize in resilience in the workplace. How did you know when you were planning your career that this would be such an important role and to get your head around and to be able to advise doctors and people in the care sectors? How did that come about?
That's a really great question. I never set out to be a specialist in resilience in the workplace. I'm a GP by background, so I went to medical school, trained, qualified as a GP, and then did some medical education as part of a portfolio career. So I was teaching medical students all about general practice. And as I went and did a master's in medical education, I was then asked to look at where in the curriculum we were doing stuff around professionalism, and I was then asked to set up and run the Doctor as a Professional course at Cambridge University, which got me really interested in the professional behaviour of busy, clever people. So I then started looking into leadership and patient safety and resilience and teamwork, and really through that my interest in resilience in the workplace develops.
Wow. And you had podcasts recently, I noticed that, and I didn't mention those, I should have done, on pandemic stress and anxiety and on COVID fatigue. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about those? And
Well, I set up a podcast about 18 months ago for doctors and other professionals in high stress jobs, really to share life hacks so that they can beat burnout and work happier, because there's a massive crisis in the NHS workforce in terms of burnout and stress, and that was even before the coronavirus pandemic. So I love listening to podcasts, so it's sort of my favourite medium for doing stuff. And I thought, well, actually, there's a lot of ideas around there out in business that sometimes haven't been translated into the medical world, and vice versa. What if we could get some guests on and translate that for people? And so we started that in, I think, September 2018. But then as the pandemic started coming, as the pandemic hit us, we then really realised that there was a need to talk to people about how to manage acute stress and anxiety, because it hit us like a train, didn't it? Most of us don't know what it's like to fear for our own physical safety, for example, and suddenly we were having to deal with that. We've never been through lockdown before, and suddenly mental health and wellbeing just shot to the forefront of what people needed to talk about. And we realised there was a massive need to try and support frontline workers. So I buddied up with a colleague of mine called Dr. Caroline Walker, who's a psychiatrist, and we started doing a series of podcasts on how to manage stress and anxiety in COVID and things like that.
Yeah, wonderful. And that seems to be quite popular. And what was behind "You're Not a Frog"?
So
thinking there.
The podcast is called You Are Not a Frog, basically because, GPs and other doctors have been compared to frogs in boiling water. This idea that the pan is heated up very, very slowly. We've got busier and busier and busier. And now we just think it's normal to be at work all day, most of the night, be checking emails all the time. And I don't think this is just doctors. I can see probably a few glances of recognition about business people as well. It's normal to be doing emails and working at the weekend. But actually, if you put the clock back 20 years' time and someone said to you, this is how you're going to be working, you'd say, no way. But as frogs in boiling water, we don't notice the pan heating up, and we get to the point where we either think, I've got to jump out of the pan and leave my job, or I'm going to burn out in the pan. And I guess the whole premise is you're not a frog. You've got other choices that you can make. There are small things that you can do yourself to make things better. And I'm very much feel that it should be possible to thrive in your work, not just survive, particularly when you're doing really purposeful work.
Yeah. And tell me how you cope with the work-life balance. I did ask you this last week, and then was astonished that you've got 3 grown-up children, and
well,
you
they're
don't
not
look old
quite grown
enough.
up. So yeah, just outside that door, I have 3 teenagers or nearly teenagers who are all homeschooling at the moment, and it's tough. Actually, it's really tough because you want to be able to supervise them more, but you've got a lot of stuff to carry on with. I'm very fortunate that they're not younger, that they're not toddlers I'm having to supervise. I really think people who are having to properly homeschool is very difficult. So I have had to learn a lot of things and tools and techniques to manage work-life balance, because work will just expand into the time it fills. So it's things like turning off at the end of the day. I've actually recently taken my emails and all social media off my phone, so I'm not tempted to check them all day and all night. It's putting boundaries in. There's lots of hints and tips and techniques, but you've got to practice what you preach, really.
Yes, you're not giving us any of the personal tips. That you've got a yoga mat behind you, I believe, and you do.
Oh, I've got a Pilates mat down there. Well, my tip, I suffer with back pain, so I've signed up for a 12-week Pilates course. So I'm doing that. And my one tip, actually, my one massive tip, and it's worked really well for me, is creating a third space between work and home, because at the moment we're all at home and there's no boundary between, my boundary is that door between when I finish work and I'm in work mode, and then when I go out and I'm in home and mother and wife mode. So there's a really great TED talk on this about the third space. So if you Google TED Talk third space, you'll see it. But most of us got that third space maybe when we had a bit of a commute to work. So you'd have 20-30 minutes where you could just reflect on the day and rest a little bit and recharge. That's gone. So you sort of need to create that yourself. So what I do to get myself out of work into home mode is actually either do Pilates or go on a run or go for a walk, so I get out of the house and I can just transition myself. So some people go walk the dog, some people go have a shower, some people do a 10-minute mindfulness meditation or something like that, or go and have a cup of tea with their other halves or something. But creating a little ritual around work life and home life for me in working from home in the pandemic has been really, really important.
Yes, thank you. That's helpful. And I know there'll be lots of questions, probably in the breakout sessions when we get there. We were asked to reflect on what it means for you in the sense of your work. When Jesus says, "Take my yoke upon you," how do you hold that in your head, and how does it help your thinking? And does it help and support you in a particular way or at a particular time of the day?
I think that's very helpful, because I think when you are a professional that's driven by purpose, which a lot of professionals are, people in business, healthcare workers, teachers, all of those sorts of things, you can feel this sort of guilt. You can feel responsible for the whole of the human race. And often people have very busy jobs, and then outside of work, they're running charities or doing stuff with their church or their particular faith group, depending on, where they are. And so they're just as busy outside of work as they are inside of work, and they can feel really responsible for people, not just their own employees and their teams, but outside the work you might feel that you need to save the world or, feed all of the hungry or stuff like this, and that all the responsibility is on you. Now, when I read that passage about, take my yoke upon me, as I understand it, and we've got lots of theologians here, I think you can probably correct me, but it's talking about that those, when you had two buffalo together and they each had a yoke. And I read that as walking there, you've got two buffalo, but I'm definitely not the biggest buffalo with that yoke. I'm a smaller buffalo, and the biggest burden, the biggest yoke is not carried by me. Okay, and I'm just there to do what I can do. I'm there to do my own part. And I try to stay very much in the role where I can help out where I can, but actually there has to be some boundaries, and I have to know my own limitations, and I have to not burn myself out trying to help people all the time, because that is what can happen a lot, and that's what I see a lot, particularly in professionals working in healthcare.
Yeah, I read that you believe strongly in lifelong learning for primary care workers, but a lot of people here are business people, and I think we need to be reminded that lifelong learning is incredibly important. We need to keep being educated, particularly in COVID times.
I think so. I think what I've learned about resilience over the years is that you're not either a resilient person or a non-resilient person. Actually, resilience is a skill that you can learn. And there's so much out there that's really, really helpful. Like one of my favourite books at the moment, I've got it here, is one called Make Time, for example. It's just fantastic. It's written by two guys, one who they created Gmail, so they know how to make tech that's going to hook you in. And they wanted to give themselves more time in the day to do what they really wanted to do. So I think just keeping on learning. Well, learning, for example, is one of the very potent well-being factors. So if we keep learning, we will be self-actualizing and we will be feeling better. But actually, if you see that there's something going wrong or you're not feeling so great, then there'll be stuff out there that can help you. So just to explore that and not be too proud to think, oh, I don't need that. I know everything there is to know. Really important. And we've just started a community for doctors actually where they can turn their CPD into actually learning about how to be resilient and thrive at work for them, so you sort of kill two birds with one stone.
The continuous professional development.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And do you have a mentor? Do you have someone who you can cry your eyes out? I mean, other than your husband?
Oh, I have several different people. I think the problem comes where you expect everything out of one person. I think it's really important to have several different mentors. Now, I have mentors that don't even know they're mentors to me. So there are people that I listen to time and time again, like Rob Bell, for example. He does a podcast called The Robcast. I think he's amazing, and I listen to stuff he does and do courses and read a lot of books that he's put out. But there are a group of friends of mine that we get together who are leaders either in healthcare or in business or in other areas. We get together once every couple of weeks and sort of do a bit of coaching in a group together. I've got, good friends that I will sort of chew the cud with over stuff. I've got, other relatives who I can sit down. So different people for different things, but I think connecting with people on a regular basis is really important, because it can be really lonely when you're running your own business, or if you're sort of leading a team, it can be quite lonely at the top, and you need to reach out and connect with people that are going to energize you.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point you raise. Quite often, as chairman of a business and other organizations, loneliness was there was no one in the organization that I could bare my soul to, and my fears and anxieties, and it did seem to be a lonely space. So how do you come back up to me on that? And you seem to be a very happy, well-balanced young woman, and I'm jealous already.
I think you'd probably have to ask my husband that, whether he completely agreed. For me, my friends are really important, and it's reaching out to people that get where you're coming from as well. I also have a group of other people who are coaches who know what I'm experiencing, because we're in the same industry. So making connections across the different industries can be really, really helpful. And people that have the same level of responsibility as you, or doing the same sort of thing as you. But you need to show a bit of vulnerability to do that. And you need to be ready to ask for help. And I think sometimes we feel that we we shouldn't share that and we shouldn't ask for help. But I think one of the reasons I've been put on this earth is to share vulnerability and say it's okay to struggle, it's okay to ask for help, and you're better together. You know, whenever I share that I'm struggling with some of my close friends, they will always give me a really great word of encouragement, or just really speak into the situation in words that are really, really helpful that I hadn't thought of. So yeah, I think just asking for help and getting like-minded people around you. And if you haven't got anyone, look for it. You know, there's loads of business networks, there's loads of different people, or get a coach. I think coaching is really, really powerful thing to do. And I don't know how any senior leader can run a big organization without having a coach, because it's two heads are much better than one, and just someone who helps you think through what you need to do, or the issues where you're stuck, and maybe reflect some stuff back to you and help a little bit with some self-awareness can be really, really important.
Good, that's very helpful. I'm just looking at some of the questions that are coming in, or comments. Say the Robcast, it's excellent, says Mark Nettleton to everyone. And Karen Kircher says that she removed all notifications from her phone to ensure I managed time on social media and emails rather than others controlling. I also encourage teams to develop curfew agreements, example 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. rule, etc. So do you have checks and balances that you switch on and off, Rachel, that you want to share with us?
Yeah, I think it's difficult when you're running your own business and it's just you, then like you're responsible for everything. So I have really started to try to close my computer down at the end of the day. I think this curfew agreement is interesting because, and I've seen lots of people now that, you know, because working from home, and particularly if you're homeschooling or a family, sometimes the only time you can get to your email is 10 o'clock at night. And you need to do that. We need to recognise that that's okay. But the problem is if you're a senior leader and you're sending out emails at 10 o'clock at night to the rest of your organisation, they then think that that's what is expected of them. So I've seen some really great stuff just in the bottom in the signature of the email saying, I am sending this email because this is when I'm doing my work. You are not expected to, you know, and I will only check my emails at, you know, midday and at 5 p.m. and I will take a while to answer them. I'm not going to answer you immediately. So I think setting an example and setting the expectation of your people is really, really important.
Yeah, that's very helpful and practical. They did say that you were down to earth and very practical, and that's coming over loud and clear. I'm sure that we'll have other questions, and I'm running out of time, aren't we, Stephen? How are we off?
Yeah, we've got a few more minutes. We could keep going. So if people want to put questions in, that would be great.
Okay, Rachel, we'll carry on. What will you be doing this time tomorrow?
Oh, this time tomorrow. Actually, this time tomorrow, I'm going to go and do a volunteer vaccinating shift in Ely. So, you know, one of the things I'm very much so, the training that I do is called the Shapes Toolkit training, and it's a sort of resilience coaching productivity toolkit that we go and we do for doctors in lots of different organisations. One of the shapes that I talk about is called the zone of power. I think it's really important. It's all about what I've got control of and what I've not got control of. Okay, so in the COVID pandemic, I started to feel quite isolated because I don't see that many people. I started to feel a bit guilty that I wasn't out there in ITU saving all these lives like those amazing doctors are. And I think a lot of people have started to feel a bit guilty, a bit isolated. And I thought to myself, actually, what can I do? What is in my zone of power? Because if you get stressed and worried about everything that you can't control, like government policy, coronavirus pandemic, all those sorts of things, and then that is a recipe for being very stressed and anxious. If you stay in what you can control, what I can do, how I choose to spend my time, then you're much more powerful and productive. And I thought to myself, I've been doing some 111 shifts for NHS, but again, I was just, as a GP, just sitting in a room on my own, talking to people. I thought, actually, I need to get out there. I thought, what can I do? I can go out there and do some vaccinating and hopefully take some burden off the GPs that are working the rest of the week and actually just need to have a little bit of a break. So I will be recording some podcasts and doing a vaccinating shift, which is actually really joyful at the moment because everyone's so grateful to get their vaccination. It's really nice.
Yes, myself included. I got mine on Sunday night at 5:36, and that was on my appointment sheet. And I thought that'd never happen at 5:36. As I sat on the chair and the needle was going into my arm, I looked at my watch, it was 5:36. How did the NHS plan that?
They can pull it out of the bag when they have to.
Extraordinary. Yes, well done. We are impressed. Rachel, I think, is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
We do just have one question that's coming actually from Jeremy Clegg. I'll read it out for you. So as a practicing doctor who's a Christian believer, do you regard the body, soul, spirit model as fundamental to understanding resilience? Is it a spiritual quality?
Oof. Gosh, that is a good question. You know what? What I bring to work is just who I am. I think what you bring to your work, I bring as a female, mother, whatever culture I'm in. You know, you can't divorce that from your work. And so I think that all these aspects affect every aspect of our resilience, right? And so I don't like divorcing the body over here and the soul over here and the spirit over here. I think, you know, it's all mixed up, and we know that a lot of physical problems that come to GPs, well, 50% of them are unexplained, and I think a lot of the problems that bring to GP are caused by stress. We actually know that stress is a very physical illness, and it also affects your soul or your spirit and your mind and your emotions and everything like that. So, you know, I think whatever we can do to promote our resilience, be it looking after our bodies or looking after our minds or our emotions, is also going to have effects on our souls and our spirits and everything like that. So I just think it's really impossible to separate those out. And I think, you know, any doctor these days believes in the importance of holistic medicine. You know, treating the whole person, not just the physical ailment in front of them. And I think that's true for resilience. It's true for anything.
Thank you for that. A lot of medical staff are Christians as well. I think there's a higher proportion of Christians amongst the medical profession than in others, lawyers and bankers and accountants, for example. Is that just a misconception?
I think there's a high proportion of faith from any faith community and amongst caring in the caring staff and the healthcare staff. Likewise, there's lots of people who are incredibly caring, have lots of purpose that don't have any faith. I think, you know, I think we sometimes have to be careful when, you know, our jobs take over our lives too much. And if you have that sort of spiritual imperative on top of it, it can also then become too much of a burden. And again, we can get the bit of the hero complex about, I've got to be here to save humanity from this deadly virus, or I've got to burn myself out working as a GP because it's my calling on this earth. And I go back to that thing about our yoke, you know, the yoke being easy and it being light. And actually, we're not there to take the big burden. We're there to take what is our part to do. So I think it's purpose and motivation. Purpose and meaning, is a really protective resiliency factor, but it can be a bit of a double-edged sword. And I think it can sometimes cause us to burn ourselves out in the course of caring. Is that an answer to your question? Bit round the houses.
Yes. Jeanette Walker, who is a member of FiBM, has said, I think we need to understand the respective roles of the spirit, soul, and body as described in The Spiritual Man by Watchman Nee. So I don't know the book myself, but maybe you do.
I'm just looking at the next comment from Chris about being loving and caring in business, not just healthcare. I completely agree, because in business you are responsible for the lives of lots of, you know, loads of people, your employees. You know, it really matters what the workplace is like, what's going on, how cared for they feel in the workplace. So 100% agree that, you know, business is you know, there's a lot of stuff around about compassionate leadership and vulnerability and all that sort of thing. You know, the evidence now is, which is great, it's just catching up, the evidence is that, you know, if you have a lot of psychological safety and a caring culture for your teams, and actually you get good performance as well. So it's win-win.
Yes, I agree. Being nice to employees always pays off.